And I just got worse. I sat with myself and I got worse and worse. And I was like, you know what? This is it. I'm done. I'm done fighting this. Everyone else is so happy. And I went and got my gun and I was like, I'm done. So not only do you need to be strong because you're a man, but you need to be strong because you're a veteran, you're a protector. You joined because you want to show everyone how strong you are. And then we send them to these places and they have these really hard experiences, whether that's violent or it's mental because they see some things or they experience some things or they're away from family, whatever it is, then they just walk around in life carrying this backpack full of rocks and they will never put it down because they're strong, they can carry it. But how exhausting it is to be a man, to be a veteran, and to have all these heavy experiences and never talk about it and just carry that load around. And then we're surprised when they commit suicide and people are like, oh, I had no idea. You're right, you didn't, because they hide it and they're pretty good at hiding it because that's what they've done their whole life.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode on Your Health is Your Greatest Wealth. I have the pleasure of introducing Jaycee Valk, and Jaycee has a very interesting background. She does work for the Public Affairs Department in the military, and Casey also works with men's mental health, amongst other things. So with that, Jaycee, take it away. Tell us a little bit about how you started working with mental health in general.
Yeah, good morning. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. So we'll just
Absolutely.
jump right into that story. Okay, so mental health in general, that's such a big part of everyone's health, and it's something a lot of people ignore until they have an issue. And so for me, my journey really started about 12 years ago when I really started to struggle with my own mental health. And doing therapy and different healing modalities, I just really uncovered what I was dealing with at the time, and just deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole I went. And so as I went deeper, I started to look around and the people around me were also struggling. They were just a little bit better at hiding it than I was at the time. And I felt so alone. I thought I was broken. I thought there was something wrong with me and that I was the only one dealing with this. But the truth is I was just very, I was dealing with it out loud, and a lot of people were dealing with it internally. And I hid a lot of it from people until about 2018. And 2018, I had my last suicide attempt. I actually attempted when I was younger as well. And in 2018, I had had a really bad day and I was like, I'm just done with everything. I drank a bottle of wine. I'm like, this will help. I got in the bathtub and I was like, you know what? I'll just drink this whole bottle. I'll just drink this entire bottle and I'll sit here and I'll feel better. And I just got worse. I sat with myself and I got worse and worse. And I was like, you know what? This is it. I'm done. I'm done fighting this. Everyone else is so happy. And I went and got my gun and I was like, I'm done. And through the grace of the universe, and I had a friend reach out to me right then and there. And shortly after my partner came home. And after that, I was like, you know what? I'm no longer going to heal in silence. I'm going to recover out loud because there's so many people that will die in that silence. And so I took from 2018 on, I dug deeper into my healing journey and was recovering out loud. And in doing that, it was just drawing people to me that were also struggling, but they weren't willing to talk about it until they knew I was struggling. And then they were like, oh my gosh, let me tell you all about this. And this is what I deal with. And so from that moment on, I was like, yeah, this is how I want to shift my career. I've been in the military for 12 years. I've had the opportunity to serve active with them and now guard. And I work for them full time as a program manager. I have loved it, but my heart and soul is in health and helping people and getting that conversation out on the table.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Number one, thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing that story. I think through sharing our stories is how we give other people permission to talk about theirs and also destigmatize the entire concept of mental health, which in the last couple of years, with the shutdowns, it did make it more all right, but it's still a stigmatized topic. And like you said, many people suffer in silence. They don't reach out for help, especially when they really, really need it. And many people should reach out for help before they need it. That also is something that we as a society need to get better about. And another thing that you said, Jaycee, is you talked about feeling alone and lonely. And I know right now here in the United States, there is a loneliness epidemic. It's actually not just in the United States, but in the United States, the statistics are that 1 out of 3 Americans is lonely at least once a week, and staggering that at least 1 in 10 Americans feels lonely every day. Right now, I see that sense of isolation, of being lonely, being one of the biggest factors why people do even contemplate suicide ideation, because they feel so alone. And that is a hard conversation to have, but it needs to be had, because right now we have had so much suicide incidences in the United States, and especially with Gen Zers, I've personally been affected by it as well. And I'm glad that we're actually now bringing that very, very heavy topic to the table. So tell me a little bit more about why you started specifically working with men's mental health and with veterans.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have the opportunity to work with both men and women, but I started studying men's mental health a few years ago. And I noticed, I mean, you talk about this loneliness epidemic, it is even deeper in with men, because men don't have, they feel like they need extra permission to open up through societal norms. They have isolated even more. That's why most suicides are committed by men, and our men are hurting, and a lot of them don't feel like they have permission to open up, and that's what's going to help you heal. And so I saw this more and more with the guys around me, especially in the military community, and I'm like, ooh, this is messy, and we just hide it and push it down, and I'm fine, because if you're not fine, then you're weak in the culture of guys. And so the more I dug into it, the more I'm like, you know what? I want to help. And so I help both men and women, but my thing is building communities. I want to build communities around it, and I want to like give men a safe place to open up and to talk about the crap they've been through, because a lot of the times the men have been through just as much as women, if not more, because they bottle it all up. So whether that happened in childhood, young adulthood, or even currently, they're suffering alone. And so I really just want to give them a space to connect. It's why I started doing these firesides. I do my wellness coaching, and I partner with my uncle who he does wellness coaching as well. So I group coach the women and one-on-one coach men and women. And then he group coaches the men and one-on-one coaches men and women. And then we get together and we do these in-person events, and we just set the stage of like, you know what? I'll go in first. I'll be vulnerable first, and so will he. And then here's all these other strong, powerful people who they can be strong and vulnerable. Like both can coexist. And then I have seen men that I have known for many years open up in this platform that I never thought they would. And it's just incredible when someone has the permission and the community and the support, they will just open up and start to heal. And it is absolutely amazing to watch it happen. And so I'm just cultivating that community and hoping it grows as big as possible, especially with veterans, because veterans, again, you have an extra layer. So not only do you need to be strong because you're a man, but you need to be strong because you're a veteran, you're a protector. You joined because you want to show everyone how strong you are. And then we send them to these places and they have these really hard experiences, whether that's violent or it's mental, because they see some things or they experience some things or they're away from family, whatever it is, then they just walk around in life carrying this backpack full of rocks, and they will never put it down because they're strong, they can carry it. But how exhausting it is to be a man, to be a veteran, and to have all these heavy experiences and never talk about it. and just carry that load around. And then we're surprised when they commit suicide and people are like, oh, I had no idea. You're right, you didn't, because they hide it, and they're pretty good at hiding it because that's what they've done their whole life.
Yeah, and so the work that you do is so important. And another thing that you said, I think we as a society do cover our emotions a lot. And I think a lot of it has to do with, as a societal norm, we are very uncomfortable with sharing feelings. I think it's fear based. And again, it's, well, they'll think I'm weak. Well, they'll think this. Well, we are so preoccupied with what other people think of us. And I think that's generally men and women. But to your point, I can see having been placed in that protector role and then feeling like you're less than if you show feelings because somehow, as you mentioned, you're perceived as weak. And I think that needs to be flipped, and showing your emotions, being vulnerable, is actually a sign of strength. And I think the more people do that and normalize it, we would be a much healthier society.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well. So as women, we see the word vulnerability as like a good thing, right? We're like, we're being vulnerable. This is great. Most men that hear that word, especially veterans, by definition, especially in the veteran community, that's a weakness, because of
Mm,
vulnerability in in your line, in your community, within your platoon, whatever that is, that vulnerability, it's literally a weakness by definition.
mm,
And so when they hear be vulnerable, they're like, yeah, no, absolutely not. Because that weak spot, someone's going to push in and hurt me, because that's what they're trained to think, that that's their environment. And so I believe it's really showing them what that looks like and changing our language a little bit around that, and showing them like, hey, like you can be strong and open up, right? And
mm,
and then when you use different words, they're like, okay, yeah, yeah. Because vulnerability doesn't have to equal weakness, but in their minds, there's that direct correlation. In most people's minds, you talk about everyone being so concerned what everyone thinks. Yeah, we walk around and we're like, they're looking at me, they're judging me, they think this, they think that. But the thing is everyone is thinking that at the same time, and we all have this narrative going on in our head constantly. But most of the time, people are so preoccupied with their own mind, they don't care. And if they do, does it really matter to you? Because if you know who you are and where you're going, it shouldn't matter what a person passing you by thinks. And if someone wants to see you crying as weak, that's their opinion. But it's so important to unload those emotions and to let it go. Put the rocks down. Because if you're carrying around that backpack full of rocks, and all my military people know what I'm talking about, because you put a backpack on and you go rock, and people film with rocks, and as a joke they sit there and they throw rocks in other people's backpacks, and so they're carrying this heavy load, and then when you take that off, when you're done, you're like, wow, it's so light. That's what it feels to open up to people. And if we stop caring so much about other people, what other
mm.
people would think about us, and we just realize like, hey, this is our one life, and I got to do this for me. I got to take this backpack off for me. And if this random person to the side of me thinks that I'm weak, that's their thing, because I'm not weak.
JC, to your point, I used to have the same perception of the word vulnerable. And I know for me, just starting to use that word and getting comfortable with it made me reframe how I thought about it. But however, because that word does carry the connotation of weakness in people's mind, how do we shift the conversation and normalize opening up, as you said, to not make it feel like a weakness? How do we shift the mindset? Where do we start? Do we just use different words?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of using different words depending on how you're teaching, right? So if you're teaching vets, I don't use the word vulnerability, because they hear that word and there's a direct connotation to weakness. I use the word unloading your emotions, taking off the weight, opening up, things like that. So there's not that direct connotation, but the more you heal, the more you realize that it's not a direct path, right?
Mm.
So I think really how we change it is you start small and you realize that, like, okay, these baby steps, these are okay. I'm safe here. So you open up to your close friends, your friends that you trust, these people that you will go to battle for, and you open up to them and you share little pieces here and there. You don't go full on, let's open up to a stranger right here and now until you've prepared for that, until you've grown to like, okay, let's open slow and let's get some trusted people around me. And once you start doing that, you realize that like it's not as scary as you thought it was going to be. And here I am on your YouTube channel sharing my story that at the time I didn't tell anyone. At the time, like when all of that was happening, I started small. My partner knew, a couple of friends knew, my therapist knew, and then it grew and grew and grew. And now I'm at the point where I get to these fireside events and I'm like, let's go deep. Let's talk about it. And sometimes I look around in people's faces, they're like, gosh, and they're so uncomfortable because they're like, how could she do this? And I did not wake up one day and be like, let's go all in. It was over the course of little micro opening up and then realizing that like, okay, this is okay. I'm safe and we're good. Everything's good. And I have my people. And now I'm at the point where I can share with people that are in my trusted circle because I know who I am. And if someone doesn't like it or wants to make fun of me, like that's their business over there and it's not mine. And that's okay. So I really think that's the answer is starting small with your trusted circle and going from there and just be the first one in. If you're this big guy, especially these guys that get in these circles and they're nervous to share, but after one really powerful share, all of a sudden everyone starts opening up. One big guy in my circle that everyone sees as strong or masculine, and all of a sudden all the guys are just fighting to go next. And they're like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. So instead of waiting for that guy, be that guy. Be that person that's like, you know what? I'll go in first. Let's do this. And so if you have that close friendship, go in. And I promise, like if you have a trusted person that loves you, they will come in after you and be like, you know what, dude, I've been there. I hear you. This is what I feel. I feel that way too. And then all of a sudden you're having this open conversation of feeling like you're not good enough in your life. And that is a very common theme for most people in their life is they feel like they're not good enough, especially men, but everyone has experienced that sometime in their life, not being good enough. And that's the shame, that's the fear, that's the weight that's telling you that. That's not reality.
Yes, that is such a valid point. And I think we have just been fed so many lies that we've bought into, and it is time for the stories to shift. The stories we tell ourselves, the stories other people tell us that we believe because they're not serving us. And what I really hear the power of what you are doing is you're really building community, and that is where the trust is found. And that is something I do feel is really lacking these days, just sense of community. So that is where I feel it does need to start as well. And another thing that I guess I would like you to share with me and the audience, I don't have a military background. I do hear that there's support for military personnel, veterans, and obviously that's not the case because we're seeing so many veterans committing suicide. So what is the breakdown for the support that these veterans are not getting through these administrative offices that I always assumed help the veterans? And hearing from you, it seems like that is not the case.
Yeah. So there is amazing organizations out there that step in and help veterans. I will never take that away from them. And there's incredible people in the VA that genuinely care. The issue lies is that they're very overloaded and also there's a lot of military members that aren't ready to admit that they need help because they
Mhm.
see that as weakness. So for me, that means creating something that looks a little bit different than your standard, hey, let's go to therapy and let's just talk about this. That looks different for a guy. And so like these fireside chats that we do, sitting around a fire, there's something in our soul that just loves fire, especially guys. They just want to be around it. And they want to touch it too. So it's a thing. It's from the time they're super little. We just went with nephews and they just want to touch the fire
Mhm.
constantly. It's so funny. So you get people out in nature, right? So
Mhm.
that's a big part of it. And around a fire, and you do a fireside, and you have like-minded people around you. So whether they're veterans or just other people that are dealing with something similar, and you start the conversation, and you go from there. And it takes something in them to be like, yeah, I need help, to go reach out, because there's all these organizations out there. There's nonprofits. There's an amazing nonprofit that I have seen friends go to that's called Boulder Crest, and they do a post-traumatic growth model. It's incredible, free to vets and first responders. And they focus on taking those rocks out of the backpack, dealing with the shame, the fear, and stuff like that. And it's veteran taught. It's incredible. However, there's this feeling that a lot of vets deal with of, I don't deserve that because there is a vet that has it worse than me. And
Oh.
a lot of people deal with that. So whether that's mental health or wellness, whatever it is, I'm okay because someone has it worse than me. So you're not wrong in saying that. Like there's always someone that has it worse. And you're still allowed to get help because where you're at still matters. Just because someone has it worse, it really doesn't mean anything. That's not in your wheelhouse. And just because you get help doesn't mean you're taking away from someone else, and you don't have to tough it out. So that's really where the problem lies, is a lot of vets don't think they're deserving of it. And so when they come into a community, I watched a friend, brilliant individual, really struggling. And when I became their friend, I was just like, wow, you should get help through the VA. You should file for your veterans disability that you're not getting, and you should do these things. And he was like, I don't know. He blew it off for quite a while. And after a while of me just telling him, like, hey, you deserve this, you matter. And he was just like, okay. And he went in and he went to that organization, Boulder Crest, and then he claimed his stuff through the VA. He had his first therapy appointment. He's going through different treatments to deal with his medical issues, but it took an outside source to tell him, hey, you're deserving, in order for him to take those steps. There's resources there, but if you're not ready, and they're pretty inundated, I believe he waited like 4 to 6 months to get a therapy appointment through the VA. That's a long time.
Time.
And a lot of veterans will wait until they're in crisis mode till they will go get help. They're like, wow, I'm gonna kill myself. I want help. They don't have 4 months. They have 4 hours. They have 4 days. They don't have 4 months. And so if they get help, a lot of the times it's super delayed. They needed help a while ago. We should be treating mental health like physical health, getting checkups, doing preventative maintenance. You do it on your car, you do it on your house. Why not do it for your mind and body? So it's just interesting that so many people think mental health is only for the mentally ill, but it's for all of us.
You brought up so many interesting perspectives. Thank you for sharing. I would have never even thought that part of the reason why they weren't getting help is because they felt they were depriving someone else of a resource if they used it. Like, I mean, that is just such an interesting perspective. And that also shows that it's a mindset thing, it's a worthiness thing, it's a deservedness thing, and these veterans that have done so much do deserve. And it's rather unfortunate that it takes outside validation for them to feel that they are deserving. However, I do feel that many people have a sense of not being worthy, of
Mhm.
not being deserved. And those are conversations that do need to change as well for the population as a whole. Thank you. Like that opened up my mind of a mind shift that I would never think that was one of the reasons why people did not get help.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is, it's something everyone deals with. That's like just an example, mother with multiple children, overloaded, stressed. If you asked her to go spend a day on herself, relaxing, rejuvenating, whatever she needs, she would say she doesn't have time, she doesn't have money.
Mhm.
But if you asked her, like, hey, will you do this for your spouse or your kid or something like that? She's like, yeah, I will. And it's this feeling that we will give and give and give to others. Men do it, women do it, but we ourselves are not deserving of the thing. We'll buy flowers for other people. We won't do it for ourselves. We'll buy gifts for other people. And there's a lot of people that don't do that for themselves. You won't bat an eye in borrowing someone money, but that program that you've always wanted to do to get certified to do your dream, we're like, well, I don't have the money for that right now. But think about it, if your spouse came to you, I just told my best friend this. I love her and she is the most incredible human who deserves a lot. And she was going to change therapists because it costs too much. And I reframed it for her. I said, you know what? If your husband came to you and said, hey, I love this therapist, I think I should change because it costs a little bit too much, what would you say? And she said, I would say no, because she's helping you. And I said, that's what you need to tell yourself. You think like, I don't need that. I don't want that. Be like, okay, what would I tell someone I love? Talk to yourself like someone you love, because you should love yourself. You really should. And before you can help anyone else, you have to put your mask on. You have to help yourself. Or what good are you to the rest of the world if you yourself aren't okay? You can't help anyone to your full capacity.
And JC, what I do see as a positive shift is I think there are more conversations these days about self-care and self-love, and in a very positive way, reframing that conversation that self-care is not being selfish. When you self-care, you are in a better position to take care of others in your life that you love. So I think all of those positive conversations need to keep happening. We need to make them the norm. We need to make them acceptable. And people do need to start believing that they are worthy. So that is also a mind shift conversation. It's why I love personal growth. I do a lot of it because I think there's always room for improvement and I always want to grow. I want my mind to grow. I want my perspectives to grow and I want to be challenged. And I see that as such a benefit of what you do with these fireside chats. And thank you for doing that. More people need to step in and be active and involved like you, especially sharing your story, because that does help individuals let their own guard down. You are the one giving them permission because they see you do it and you're walking that path first. So thank you for doing that. JC, to be respectful of your time and wrap up this chat, what is the one piece of advice you would leave people with hearing this interview about how they can improve their own mental health and feel all right about doing it?
Hmm, that's a big one. Um, you know, the word selfishness comes out a lot in when you start making decisions for you. And so as you start making decisions, you need to realize that there's going to be people in your life that aren't okay with that. And that's because those people benefit by you being unhealthy. So whether they're people that take from you or that overload you with items and they just expect you to do them, there's going to be people benefiting from you being unwell. And so as you continue your health journey, so mental health, physical health, all of that, you're going to have people drop off. And that's okay because there's new people on the other side of that. And so when I stopped drinking, I lost some people in my life. The alcohol wasn't serving me, and I had a really hard time with that. And I just realized that, you know what, we're moving through that. And on the other side of that, I have this friend group that is incredibly healthy and motivating. And they're like, let's go out and do these healthy things. Let's go to breath work. Let's go to yoga. Let's go hiking.
Mm.
And once I moved through that, like, okay, it's okay. The change is good. And it's going to be a little uncomfortable at times. There's going to be times that you go into something and you're like, oh, I'm so nervous. But uncomfortable means that you're growing, because if you're constantly comfortable, you're not growing. And nature knows this. Nature, I use this hermit crab metaphor quite a bit, but a hermit crab gets really uncomfortable right before they go to move to a bigger shell. And so they get so uncomfortable and they're like, this is awful, time to move. And so that growth requires that uncomfortable moment. So if there's something you wanted to go do, but you're nervous, do it. Take that little bitty step. Call that person that you've been wanting to hang out with, but you're like, maybe they don't want to hang out with me. Maybe they do. So we're so quick to go to the negative side of things. And what if all this bad stuff happens? But what if all this good stuff happens? And those baby steps and being okay with being a little bit uncomfortable, being okay with like, okay, if I lose some friends, but they weren't healthy from me, is it really a loss? I can honor the friendship we had and still move forward. Like that growth, that getting healthy, that understanding you're worthy is going to take some uncomfortable moments. And there is people like, I remember the first time, it sounds so silly now, but the first time I bought myself flowers, I was uncomfortable with it. And I was like, someone should be buying these for me. Like, I I'm so selfish. I should give these to someone. And it was just like, no, it's okay. And then I would see them in my kitchen and I'm like, no, I deserve this. So those little uncomfortable moments lead to so much growth when you turn around and you look at them. And now I can laugh at that and be like, that was ridiculous. But in the moment, I wanted to crawl out of my skin because I was finally doing something for me and I didn't used to do that ever. And I remember the first time I went to dinner by myself and I was in my mid-20s. And some people hear that and they're like, what? But there is a lot of people, they won't vacation, they won't even go to dinner by themselves or go get coffee by themselves because they're terrified of that. Get a good book, go to a coffee shop. You never know who you'll meet. And if there's someone that walks in and you seem like you have a lot in common, maybe bridge that tiny gap and say hi. So that's a long way of saying it, but really it's just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable at times and knowing that in mental health, just like physical health, in order to build muscle, you actually have to break it down. That's your muscle tears when it rebuilds. And it's so interesting in the gym, we're okay with that. We lift weights and we know it's hard, but it will be worth it. The same goes on in mental health. It will be a little bit hard, but that's when you know you're growing, is the push, the little bit of like, I want to crawl on my skin, I want to throw up. Keep going. You're good. It's okay. As long as you're safe physically, you're going to be able to get through it. You might throw up, maybe, but that's okay. You'll get through that as well. And at the end of the road, you'll know that like all those little steps equated to something really big. And then you can turn around and be like, I'm worthy. And if you ever forget to believe in yourself, find a good friend or a good coach or a good community and borrow their belief. And just borrow that for a second until you learn how to believe in yourself and just go for it.
Jaycee, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really love your positive perspectives. I love the mind shifts, and I know this is a very difficult topic to talk about. So thank you for doing the hard work to heal yourself, because that is helping others heal themselves. And thank you again just for being here today.
And thank you so much for having me. What you're doing really is amazing. You're branching out this platform in incredible ways and showing people like, hey, we get to look at this different and look at all these people that are in this space. And really the only way that all of us got in this space is by being in the dark and turn around and saying like, hey, I know my way out. I have a flashlight. Let's go. And that's the only way that you got here too. And so thank you so much for being here and for turning around and being like, hey, I got a flashlight. Let's show other people the way out. And I love it.
So true. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, thank you everyone for being here on another episode of Your Health is Your Greatest Wealth. Thank you. Hello, this is Blanca Luna Ainsworth. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. And if you haven't already subscribed to Your Health is Your Greatest Wealth, can you do that now? Just hit the subscribe button below. And also please share. And what I also wanted to let you know is that this is not just a YouTube channel, it is a movement. The whole goal is to help you improve your own health. Okay? Thank you.